I'm Sam Stacey. I'm Challenge Director for Transforming Construction. This is a program that's been underway for over a year now, and we're really starting to see some changes. So rather than talk about what we're planning to do, it's really starting to get into what we're already achieving. So joining the transformation that is happening in construction. And I think you're seeing that from what you see around in the show today and all sorts of sources of information about the changes that are emerging in construction. So just a little bit about myself. I've worked in the construction industry all my life. I've loved it and been frustrated by it in equal measure. The joy of the role I've got now is that I've really got a chance to do something about what's frustrated me, and I think frustrated loads of people in the construction industry. We know what we do is incredibly important for society. I know, and I think some people know, that the UK construction industry is a world leader. Time after time I go to other countries and I find that they're behind where we are in terms of development of their construction industry. They're really interested in hearing about what we're doing, and that's a great strength for us. That's an opportunity for our industry and something to be really proud of in terms of what we've achieved so far. So where are we today? What are these frustrations that I've mentioned? Well, we know that the built environment is an emitter of greenhouse gases and a sort of significant part of the problem of global warming at the moment, and we know that we can do something about that. Our infrastructure is slightly embarrassing in this country. We rank, in terms of the quality of our infrastructure in the world, we rank something like 26th, I believe, which, you know, for the status of our country is poor. There's a hell of a lot more that we need to do in relation to that. And while we've got some fantastic buildings in this country, we've also got some pretty terrible ones. So there's been a study on the actual cost of treating illnesses associated with our poor building stock, that part of our building stock that is poor, and that's 600 million a year. So, I mean, I think people who've worked in the industry, are embedded in it, know that it's not a system that's working for us as a whole at the moment, but there are tremendous opportunities to change that. And this pie chart really indicates just the scale of the opportunity. If you saw a pie chart like that for manufacturing, for automotive or electronics or what have you, it would look like about 10% of the time was non-productive and the rest was productive. So on the one hand, we've got all us in our businesses in construction struggling to make the margins and so forth, and yet we've got this massive wad of waste and an opportunity to improve things. Now, it was in 2013 that wise heads in the industry got together and looked at what was feasible in terms of targets for 2025, which seemed like a long way off then. And the view was that the targets you see here were feasible for the industry. Massive improvements on where we were. In actual fact, there's been, you know, fairly good progress in the direction of these targets since 2013, but what we're doing now, and what I'm absolutely confident we are doing now, is really shooting that curve upwards towards these targets. So I'll come back to this later on in the presentation. So where's the villain of the piece? What is going wrong? Because, you know, loads of people, loads of companies are working their butts off to do the best job that they can, but there's something wrong with the system. It's not that we've got bad people in construction. We have tremendously impressive people in the industry, but the system is wrong. And I think that it's about focusing on cheapness and not value. That's what causes the fragmentation of the industry. That's what means that there is all this abortive work, all this tendering at all these different levels, and that's generating a lot of the waste and generating this sort of nitpicking, cost-cutting in different areas, which actually results in a more expensive building at the end of the day, doesn't deliver value for the customers, and doesn't create profit for the organizations involved. Part of the implication of that is you've got slim margins in the industry that are preventing innovation. So we've got to address these systemic problems in the industry. Obviously, that picture is a picture of Grenfell. That is, you know, the worst example of what we've got in the construction industry. So we've got a program here. I'm running a program that involves 3 transformational changes for the industry. Procurement based on value, on lifetime value of the assets. A whole change of mindset whereby we're really trying to procure buildings that benefit society, that are good for the industry, and provide benefits all round that are significantly better than what we're used to. We're supporting innovative methods of construction. So there's a massive push, and I've got some examples of that, to do things better, to use different techniques, the way that we design, the way that we deliver, the way that we manage our assets, all massively improved. And then an absolutely necessary part of the program is sharing and scaling best practice for the industry. You know, we're so aware that we can't go off, me, my team, the collaborators, we can't go off into a huddle and sort of come up with brilliant things. We've got to propagate the change through the industry. And I'm delighted to see that a lot of that is happening already, and we need to build that momentum, accelerate that change as we go along. So first of all, a procurement based on lifetime value. And this has a lot to do with government procurement's role in this. Because we're joined up with government, because I'm sponsored and my program is sponsored by government, we've got a tremendous amount of buying power, leverage from government to drive the change. A few years ago, 2016, the government created the Infrastructure and Projects Authority to coordinate the buying activities of government across the 5 government departments that mainly procure construction. MHCLG, the housing bit, sort of tacked on to that. So we have a really joined up approach from government, really determined to use their power, their buying power and their regulatory power to drive change through the industry. So we got new standards and compliance rules that are coming through in this system. And we're really involving this whole life value approach to the assets in this system. So using digital twins so that we can use digital modeling to optimize the use of the assets, starting to integrate sensors and data feedback from the buildings into the whole system. So sort of the buildings are talking to us about what they need and how to maintain them, much in a way as just about all cars now, but I was going to say higher end cars do. You know, you've got indicators of when you need to look at the oil or change the filters or what have you. So a really good coalition on the side of the clients of the industry. Department of Transport will be a big effect there. So that 15 billion you see there, that really doesn't include the transport sector, which is actually quite a lot bigger than all that. But obviously the government is procuring transport through arm's length bodies, so a lot of influence there. And I have to say that in terms of the private sector clients, we're already seeing some really good indication of those clients getting on board and recognizing that there's a great deal of benefit in applying these new approaches. Spearheading part of this is the work with schools. So I think that's where we're going to see the most visible and the most immediate changes in terms of the design specifications and the procurement approach. So we're working with the DFE, we're working to standardize school production, make sure that we're really focusing on the outcomes for the kids in the schools, so really kind of user focused in terms of what we're doing, getting the economies of scale, the fewer defects, the lower whole life cost, really enhancing the whole life performance, and crucially turning these schools, or the schools that we turn out in the future, into energy positive buildings. So not buildings that are contributing to the environmental problems of the world, but are solving them. Buildings as power stations, schools as power stations, so that the kids learning in these schools get a sense of how there is hope for the environment, there is a hope for how we can use the built environment to improve the world rather than create some damage for it. So just to go into a little bit more detail on that, at the heart of, well, the Transforming Construction program, but in this example, the schools program, is the platform approach to design, where you identify what the high value outcomes are that you're after for construction. So that's where you bake in the principles that you're trying to achieve. And it sounds obvious, but that's really not done at the moment. You know, that's something that is quite a radical change of thinking for the industry. On the basis of understanding what your high value outcomes are, you come up with a rule book for how you're going to design the building, the things you need to take into consideration. So a set of clear rules that we can work with. That will lead to a kit of parts approach to building, where you've got interoperability between the parts that can fit together. And what we're trying to do here is generate an ecosystem of suppliers who can innovate in relation to these kit of parts. I sort of relate comparable to the app system that Apple has created for their products. You set up the rules, and then you stimulate really good innovation and benefits out there in a wide market to contribute to a system that you defined. So what we expect to see is quite rapid improvement in the parts that go into the kit of parts. We're involved in terms of coming up with a system configurator. So how you pull all these parts together and really automating and digitizing that to make it a lot quicker and more effective. And already we've got some good results there. What this whole approach, the platform approach, incorporates is the opportunity to get this golden thread of information through the whole building process. This is something that came out of the Hackett report into Grenfell. We need this golden thread of information running through everything we do, so that we're absolutely sure that the system will perform and we haven't got risks like fire risks and so forth in that. And then there's the digital twin. So moving to this state where every time we design a building, we design it, as it were, design and build it for real, but we have the digital twin of that asset. Helps us through the design stage, but also critically helps us through the management of that asset, the whole life of that asset, to enable us to optimize the use of that asset through its life. So we've modeled how we think the changes in the construction industry will evolve. We've got government clients leading the way, but as I say, we expect propagation through the industry. And you may not be able to read, well, you probably can, the key here. But essentially, traditional construction, as we do it at the moment, rapid decline over the next 10 years. What might be a slight surprise to people is to see that we're not expecting modular to increase that significantly over the next 10 years. Really, where the massive increase should come is the platform approach. We think it will give rise to overall greater efficiencies and overall a much more vibrant ecosystem of innovation and improvement in the industry. The green slice here, incidentally, is the retrofit slice. And you've only kind of got to look at the sums in terms of what we need to do to upgrade the existing built environment in order to see that we need to do a massive amount of retrofit to upgrade the existing built environment. So I think that the size of that is probably much more modest than it should be. But this is operating with the constraints that we have today in terms of government budget, and we don't quite know what's going to happen in terms of support for retrofit going forward. But I think we can anticipate an enormous amount of activity in the retrofit space. So moving on to the innovative methods of construction. So what I've talked about so far is how we've got great support from government and other clients to drive the change, and we're doing something about the design standards. Where the real bulk of the money that that's associated with my program is going is into developing, de-risking, proving the innovative methods of construction. So as I expect many people will be aware, we've got 170 million of government funding going into this as sort of seed capital to generate the change. The industry has committed 250 million of investment into this change, and the signs are that the industry absolutely is stepping up in terms of providing that match funding. I would actually expect that when we do the reckoning at the end of the program, we'll find that a great deal more than 250 million has been invested by industry in this change. It is a 4-year program, which we're part way into, and the idea is that we reset the industry during this four years. I'm very optimistic, and I think there is a need for sort of sector deal Mark II from the government to support the industry, but we have to achieve a sustainable change with this initial burst of activity and support for the industry. And I'm sure that we'll be able to do that. And then I think with a better organized industry, a much more capable industry, then we can kind of shoot forward in terms of the actual quality and benefit of the output that we produce. So how are we splitting that money? Well, the biggest chunk is going to the Construction Innovation Hub, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a moment. The second biggest chunk is going to investing in and de-risking consortiums of organizations, companies coming together to develop innovative solutions. And then 36 million is dedicated to developing energy positive buildings for the nation. The buildings as power stations that I've mentioned. So innovative methods of construction, I've identified it as 3 categories here. So the design and the platforms and the components of the building, the platform approach that I've talked about a bit already, and then investing in how we make all those bits. So really joining up design for manufacture and assembly with the best possible manufacturing processes. And we've sort of opened the channels of knowledge transfer from other sectors, from automotive, electronics, aerospace, and so forth, into our industry to really sort of almost, I think, leapfrog some of the activities that have been going on in previous decades, moving straight through with construction to what's referred to as Industry 4.0. So a real change in manufacturing processes, and then really getting into these energy positive technologies, trying them at scale, making sure that they're user friendly, making sure that we've got the data to prove that investment in energy positive technologies is really sound, and it makes financial sense as well as sense in all other respects. So I'll run through a few examples of what we've already achieved, or the findings we've already got. Hyperpile. So Hyperpile is a consortium that is led by Keltbray and has some other members here. So this is about making a really significant change to what is a very big, but obviously somewhat hidden part of construction, the foundations of buildings. Cement-free, so significantly reducing the embodied carbon associated with the foundations. Putting monitoring into the foundations so that we don't have what we have today, which is you don't really know what's in the ground, you can't be confident about what more loads you can put on them, so people are either digging them out or putting in new foundations when they replace or upgrade the building. So the monitoring thing. And then integrating energy positive technologies into the piles. So obviously you go down into the ground, you've got static temperatures in the ground, and you can harvest heat and indeed cool from the ground. So advancing the way that we use the constant temperature in the ground for energy positive purposes in the construction industry. Big piece of work is being done by Buro Happold and a number of other really influential and significant players in the industry to make sure that interoperability on the digital side is covered. So that allows manufacturers to much more easily collaborate in the early stages of design. Buro Happold is already seeing that they can save about $1 million a year in terms of efficiencies that they can get from this system. So Buro Happold is a big but not massive consultant. So if you just think of the scale of benefit that can come to the industry as a result of that, it's really quite spectacular. And like so many of these things, there are all sorts of knock-on benefits. Yes, there's cost savings, but there's savings in terms of de-risking, in terms of quality improvements and such like. So we're testing that on 3 live construction projects, and that's very much a focus of everything we're doing. I think that, dare I say it, there's been a tendency in terms of supporting innovation in construction to not be quite close enough to market. But what we're determined to do is to really demonstrate, at the market, in the market, that stuff works, and that you can be absolutely confident in sort of jumping on the bandwagon and getting involved in these things. That's fine. An interesting early success is the seismic project. So this is going to go on to have a next phase where we do sort of whole schools, but this is about standardizing the dimensions and the frames for schools. And just through a very impressive collaboration between McAvoy and Elliott, both established off-site providers, they've come together to massively reduce, you can see the figures here, the carbon emissions associated with the frames, the design time associated with the frames for schools, and also inevitably the assembly time for these buildings. So this is an example of how we're at least meeting the targets that I referred to right at the beginning, these ambitious targets for the construction industry. So some really good signs there, and as I say, we'll be investing in further work to look at the wider portfolio of components for buildings, school buildings. We're going hard at the resi sector as well. So we're working with Barratt and London and Quadrant on advanced industrialized methods for the construction of homes. So again, really getting into the efficiencies that are possible in terms of home production. Much greater productivity being achieved from the workforce there. What you'll see in the picture here is a roof that's been made on the ground as a module that can be lifted into place. We're finding something like double the productivity from the labor associated with these projects from this. So much faster, again, the better quality, all the things that we're after. And the great thing is we're working with players that have huge influence and reach into the market. So we're seeing the impact already. You know, this isn't sort of further down the line. This is stuff that's happening around us now. And that's, I think, what's so significant about this. Similar sort of thing is being done in the office construction, commercial development space. So Landsec and Easy Space and Bryden Wood coming together to create office buildings as kit of parts. And again, huge efficiencies already being shown there. In the pilot example that you see a picture of here, we're seeing huge efficiencies. 50% fewer workers needed on site. Shorter programs, significant reduction in materials. So all these benefits that we're after. And again, we're about to be investing in a much bigger sort of finished building, permanent building example of this. So again, you'll have a tangible example of seeing the platform approach to construction applied to the commercial office sector. Active buildings. So again, we're applying already these technologies to active buildings. In this case, a housing estate, Neath. So applying the solar collection, the energy storage with Tesla batteries involved in the buildings. Tata Steel involved in terms of investing in these buildings and bringing their technology to them. So the net result is you're going to get really comfortable homes with lower running costs, healthier environment, and again, we're expecting this to influence many, many more projects. There'll be a rollout of demonstrator projects showing energy positive technologies and enabling us to prove the figures for the investability of these concepts. Just to mention a couple more examples, there's a consortium involving Bouygues, so one of the world's biggest contractors, working on the sort of the latest thing in smart sensor-controlled homes. Again, involving the fabrication techniques and the automated and parametric design that I've talked about, but really making use of sensor technology so that we can optimize the in-use operation of homes in this case. And one last example that I'll flag up in terms of innovative methods of construction is a slightly more academic study, but already collaborating with some of the big players like Laing O'Rourke in the industry to optimize concrete production, or not the shapes and the structures that we make with concrete. As most people will be aware, concrete at the moment is massively over-designed. So for simplicity of casting, we create much more material. We put in place much more material than we need to do. An optimized concrete structure would be a curvy structure that follows the bending moment diagrams and the shear forces and so on in that structure. And what this consortium is doing is coming up with automated and efficient ways to create those optimized shapes. And it'll be very interesting to see the outputs from that. So what we've got there is a whole collection of solutions that are already showing that these ambitious targets that we've come up with are feasible, are working, and you can confidently go ahead and copy them. Now, the question arises how we share all this information, how we make sure that there's easy ways to access this knowledge, this know-how for the industry. And that's where, more than anything, the Construction Innovation Hub comes in. So the Construction Innovation Hub will be a knowledge base for manufacturing and product family architecture, the platform approach that I've talked about, a knowledge base for the standards of compliance associated with the new ways of doing things, an information management framework for the industry related to digital twins for the construction industry, and addressing the energy security issues for the industry. You know, as everything gets more digital, there is always the risk of hacking and interference with the digital knowledge about the assets. So we're incorporating the latest thinking in terms of digital security around this. There are close links and liaison into government associated with this program from the Construction Innovation Hub, and a massive program of engagement with the industry. So just to explain a little bit more about how this is structured, Construction Innovation Hub represents 3 centres coming together. The Manufacturing Technology Centre, that's part of the High Value Manufacturing Catapult. So this is really where the expertise comes in of transferring knowledge between different sectors in industry. Then the BRE, Building Research Establishment, huge reach into the industry, huge expertise in terms of testing and know-how about what works in the industry, fire testing, structural testing, all that sort of thing. So they will do a lot of the propagation and knowledge spread through the industry, and provide the data sheets and the assurance associated with all the products that are being produced. And then Cambridge Centre for Digital Built Britain is part of the consortium, dealing with all the digital aspects of the programme. Then the Active Building Centre will be the centre of knowledge and knowledge propagation relating to energy positive technologies. So this slide explains the building scale aspect of this. So stuff that we're kind of familiar with, but we need to optimize and make easy for everybody to adopt. The solar panels, the heat exchangers, battery storage, so whether it's a Tesla battery or various other forms of storage that we've got, and integrating into the sort of ecosystem of running electric vehicles. So with buildings that we've already done as part of the Active Building Centre programme, we're already running a fleet of electric vehicles. Takes an enormous amount of pressure off the grid, the need to add extra power generation in the nation through nuclear or whatever it is. The pressure comes off that, and we can really make buildings part of the solution to the energy network for the country. And then we'll also be looking at community integration. So as you can imagine, if you've got this energy generating power, ideally you want to be able to share energy between buildings, make sure that you can optimize storage in one building for covering peak loads in other buildings and so forth. So this is all part of the program. Also looking at the retrofit part of the market in terms of that. So in terms of all the knowledge sharing and propagation of this best practice and know-how through the industry, we'll be having a big week of engagement in July in the summer to really share this more. But already we've got in place these centres and this network of knowledge sharing that everybody can exploit and make use of. So I think we've got great momentum at the moment. There's a great deal to get engaged with. These figures in terms of targets that seem so ambitious and almost unbelievable some years ago, we're finding that we really can do it, that we can show people examples of what can be achieved. And the benefits are so widespread. Benefits for the users of buildings, benefits for people in the industry, and so forth. So this is the penultimate slide, showing just how widespread the benefits of this program are looking to be. Benefits for the owners of buildings, benefits for the users of buildings, benefits of the industry that will that much less suffer from tiny margins and financial uncertainty, benefits for the operators of buildings to get more certainty of performance and efficiency of cost and so forth in the running of buildings, and for the nation as well. If we get higher productivity from the construction industry, we have higher wages, we have a better national economy. So benefit for the whole of society through that. In terms of the social benefits, better built assets, more beautiful, I hope, buildings to look at for in the nation. The export potential is very significant from the program, as you can see. And then the environmental benefits. You know, really digging into the massive issues of relating to the environment that we've got. So we've got momentum, we've got proof, we've got government support, we've got cash. Get involved, whoever you are relating to the construction industry. We have a train rolling ahead. You can get on it, be part of it, and join the transformation in the industry. Thank you very much. Have we got a few minutes for questions, if there are any? Okay. Would anyone like to ask anything? Yes. There's a microphone coming to you.
Which were the 3 live projects where Bura Happold were working on? One of your examples?
In truth, I don't know the answer to that. I'd have to get back to you, but if you let us have your details, we can get back to you.
Okay.
Sherry, I don't know if you... Yeah. Sherry here does know or be able to help you with that, but sorry, I haven't got the answers on the tip of my tongue.